They told her to pour the water and stay invisible. A plain grey dress, a corner by the wall, 22 of the most powerful people in the city seated at a candlelit table, and not one of them could remember her face an hour later. Her own boss had hidden her there on purpose so she wouldn't embarrass the company. They called her frumpy, provincial, the human stapler. They laughed about her in the elevator, certain she was the kind of woman who never noticed anything. They had no idea. They didn't know that the quiet woman in the corner had once talked a warlord out of 40 executions in the dark in his own language with a gun on the table. They didn't know that a single sentence, one clause twisted on purpose by a man who was paid to make that room explode, was about to push a $400 million deal off a cliff and start a war. And they had no idea that the most dangerous man in the country was sitting in the shadows at the far end of that table, watching her. Because he had been protecting her in secret for 7 years, watching her sleep on trains, standing 90 seconds away from her door every single night of her life. And she had never once known his name. Tonight, all of that was about to come apart. Because tonight the ambassador was about to rise from his chair, button his coat, and walk out into the rain, and the woman they sat in the corner was about to do the one thing no one in that room believed she was capable of. She was about to step away from the wall. Stay with me until the end of this one, because by the time it's over, you'll understand why a man who feared nothing was terrified of losing her. Let's begin. Act 1: The woman in the corner. The first thing Maya Castellanos noticed about the embassy dining room was that someone had arranged the flowers to fail. White lilies in November in a room meant to broker a $400 million shipping accord between two governments that despised each other. Lilies were funeral flowers in half the cultures seated at that table. Whoever had ordered them either knew nothing or knew everything, and wanted the evening to die before the soup was served. She filed the thought away the way she filed everything now, silently, uselessly, into the locked room inside her chest where her old life kept screaming and no one could hear it. Maya. Her supervisor, Gregory Halloran, snapped his fingers without looking at her. He was a soft man who wore expensive suits the way a child wears a parent's coat swallowed performing. The water. And for God's sake, stand by the wall. We don't need you featured. A junior associate near the door laughed under her breath. The word featured did its little cruelty. Maya had heard them in the elevator that afternoon, frumpy, provincial, the human stapler, believing the doors were closed and that she was the kind of woman who didn't notice things. She noticed everything. That was the curse they couldn't see. She noticed the tremor in the foreign minister's hand, the way the ambassador's security chief kept touching his left cuff, the lily that had wilted faster than the others because it sat directly under a heating vent. She lowered her eyes, smoothed the front of her grey dress, and took her place against the wall like furniture. Through the tall windows, Chicago was drowning. Rain came off the lake in sheets, smearing the headlights of the black cars idling along the curb into long ribbons of gold. There were a great many black cars tonight, more than a consulting dinner warranted. She had counted 6 SUVs that had not moved in 2 hours, their engines breathing pale smoke into the cold, their drivers watching the door and not their phones. That was the second thing she noticed, and it frightened her in a way she couldn't name. The room filled. 22 people, 3 languages spoken openly, and at least 2 more murmured in corners. At the head of the table sat Ambassador Diallo, a tall, exact man with the stillness of someone who had survived 3 coups by reading rooms faster than other men could read documents. To his right, the foreign delegation. To his left, the men who called themselves businessmen. And at the far end, arriving last, came a man who made the entire room recalibrate without saying a word. Maya felt him before she looked. It was a thing she remembered from her old life, the way a space reorganizes its gravity around true power. He was tall, dressed in charcoal, so dark it drank the candlelight, and he moved with the unhurried economy of a man who had never once in his life had to rush because the world rearranged its schedule around his. His face was severe and beautiful in the cold way of carved things. Black hair, a jaw like a closed door, and eyes the gray of a winter harbor. He did not take the seat they offered him at the center. He took the chair against the far wall in the shadow where he could see every exit and every face. He took, she realized with a small electric jolt, the same kind of seat she had taken. The watcher's seat. For one instant his gaze swept the room and stopped on her. It was not the glance a powerful man gives a serving woman. It was not dismissal. It was not appetite. It was recognition, sharp and total, the look of a man who has been waiting a very long time in a station for a train and has just heard it on the rails. Maya looked away first, her pulse strange in her throat. She told herself she had imagined it. Men like that did not recognize women like her. Women like her had spent 4 years making sure of it. The dinner began, and the dinner began to die. She watched it happen the way you watch a car drift toward a guardrail slowly, then all at once. The interpreter, the firm had hired a smooth young man named Reinhardt with a Geneva accent and beautiful cufflinks, was good. He was very good. Which is why, when he made the mistake, Maya knew instantly that it was not a mistake. The clause was about demurrage, the penalty fees, port charges when cargo sits too long. A dry technical thing. The foreign minister, speaking in rapid Wolof-inflected French, raised a condition that demurrage penalties be suspended during the first 90 days as a gesture of good faith between new partners. Reinhardt turned to the ambassador's side and said in clipped, fluent Portuguese that the delegation demanded the penalties be enforced from the first day, without exception, as a test of the other party's discipline. He inverted it. He took a gift and translated it into an insult. Maya's whole body went cold and still. She watched the words land. She watched Ambassador Diallo's spine straighten one vertebra at a time. She watched the man's hand close slowly over his fork, not to eat, but to have something to hold while his pride caught fire. He believed he had just been told that his government was undisciplined and required testing by men he already suspected of contempt. Then perhaps the ambassador said very quietly in English now, so that everyone would understand the size of what was breaking, "We have misjudged the spirit of this table." He set down his fork. He placed both hands flat on the linen. He began with terrible dignity to rise. Gregory Halloran made a sound like a man stepping on a stair that wasn't there. Across the room, the businessmen exchanged a glance. Maya didn't like too fast, too prepared. And in the corner, the man in charcoal had gone utterly motionless, his grey eyes moving from the ambassador to Reinhardt, and then deliberately like a man placing a bet to her. To her. As if to say, well, I know what you are. Will you let it burn? 4 years of silence pressed down on her like deep water. Stay against the wall. Don't be featured. You ruined the last room you spoke in. People died because you opened your mouth. The old voice, her own voice, the one that had kept her safe and small. Then she looked at the ambassador's face, a good man about to walk out into the rain, carrying a wound that someone in this room had inflicted on purpose. And the old thing in her, the thing she had buried in a grave with no name, sat up. Maya stepped away from the wall. "Ambassador Diallo," she said. And she said it in flawless, formal Wolof, the syllables soft and exact, the dialect of his home region, and not the textbook capital. The whole table turned as if pulled by a single wire. "Forgive me," she continued, still in Wolof. "There has been an error in the translation, and the error is an insult you were never meant to receive. The minister offered you a gift. He proposed suspending all penalties for 90 days, as a sign of trust between new friends. The word that reached you was the opposite of the word he spoke. You have not been tested, sir. You have been honored." Silence. The kind that has texture. The ambassador slowly sat back down. Reinhardt's beautiful face had gone the color of the tablecloth. He opened his mouth, and Maya turned to him, and continued switching now into Portuguese, the language he had used to do the damage, so that he would understand precisely that she understood. And the gentlemen on this side, she said in Portuguese, were told they were being insulted when in fact they were being trusted. I imagine that confusion served no one at this table. A pause, or perhaps it served someone very well. She let that hang. Then she turned to the foreign minister and repeated his original offer in his own French, warm and correct. To the Portuguese-speaking businessmen, she rendered the ambassador's renewed goodwill. To a delegate at the far end, she addressed a clarifying courtesy in Mandarin because she had heard him whispering to his aide and knew his English was a performance. When the security chief muttered something tense in Russian into his cuff, she answered the room's sudden unease in Russian, smoothing it. And when the ambassador, testing her now almost smiling, asked her a quiet question in Arabic about whether she truly understood what she had repaired, she answered him in Arabic that, yes, she understood exactly, and that a single mistranslated clause had nearly cost 2 nations a friendship. And that friendships, unlike contracts, did not always come back to the table once they left it. 6 languages, in under 3 minutes. Spoken not to perform, but to save each sentence a stitch in something that had been torn. The table exhaled as one body. Ambassador Diallo studied her for a long, long moment. Then he did the thing that no one in that room would ever forget. He rose again, but this time he came around the table past his own delegation, past the stunned businessman, and stopped in front of the woman in the grey dress they had hidden against the wall. "Madam," he said in English, so all of them would hear it, "I have sat at tables in 40 countries. I have been lied to by professionals." His eyes flicked once to Reinhardt. "You are the only person in this room who has told me the truth tonight." He turned to the rest of them and his voice cut. "I will continue these negotiations on one condition. She speaks for both sides. Not him, Reinhardt, her. Or I take the morning flight home, and you may all explain to your governments why." Gregory Halloran made his stair-step sound again, and in the corner the man in charcoal finally moved. He set down the glass he had not been drinking from, and he smiled. Small, private, and devastating, the smile of a man whose long secret patience had just at last been rewarded. The rest of the dinner Maya barely remembered, only that she ran on instinct and ancient muscle memory, that the languages came back to her hands like birds that had only ever been pretending to be gone, that the deal she'd been hired to pour water beside knit itself back together because she was holding the thread. It was nearly midnight when it ended in handshakes and the careful, exhausted cheer of men who had walked to the edge of disaster and stepped back. Gregory cornered her by the coat check, his face caught between fury and the dawning greedy, understanding that her triumph might somehow be made into his. Where he hissed, "Did you learn, Mr. Halloran?" A voice behind them. Low, unhurried, with an edge under the velvet. It was him, up close. He was worse or better taller, the cold grey eyes warmer than they had any right to be, a faint scar threading through one dark eyebrow, like a line drawn through a sentence. He did not look at Gregory. He looked only at her, and Gregory shrank as if a window had been opened on a January night. "Mr. Marchetti," Gregory stammered. "Sir, I didn't realize you were—" "You will apologize to Miss Castellanos," the man said, still without glancing at him. "Then you will go home. We'll discuss your firm's interpreter and how he came to be on tonight's list tomorrow." The name moved through the room like a draft. Marchetti. Maya watched 3 different men decide very quickly to be somewhere else. Gregory apologized. It was a small, ugly, wonderful thing to witness. Then he fled, and then it was only the 2 of them and the rain on the tall windows and the candles guttering low. "You knew my name before he said it," Maya said. It wasn't a question. 4 years of silence had sharpened her, not dulled her, and she could feel the shape of something enormous standing just outside the light. "He called you Marchetti. You sat in the watcher's seat. You waited to see what I would do." Her voice did not shake, which surprised her. "You hired Reinhardt's firm, didn't you? You knew the deal would be on the table tonight." Lucian Marchetti regarded her with something that was almost tenderness and almost grief. "I knew a great many things tonight, Miss Castellanos," he said. "But not what you would do. That was the one thing I could not arrange. I have wondered for 7 years whether the woman I remembered was still alive, somewhere inside the one who'd buried her." His gaze moved over her face like a man reading the last page of a book he'd been afraid to finish. "She is. I've never met you in my life." "No," he agreed. "But I have met you." He took one step closer, and then very deliberately did not take the next one, as if there were a line on the floor only he could see. 7 years ago, in a country I won't name, in a room with windows, a young diplomat with no authority and no backup talked a warlord out of executing 40 hostages he'd taken from a convoy. She did it in his own language in the dark for 9 hours, with a gun on the table. One of those hostages was a 19-year-old boy who had no business being there. Something flickered behind the grey. "That boy is my brother. His name is Matteo. He is alive because of you, and you walked away into your government silence without ever knowing his name or mine. Or that from that night forward there was a man in this world who would let nothing touch you. Ever." The room tilted. Maya put a hand against the cold marble of the wall. "That was classified," she whispered. "No one knew I was there. No one. I am not no one," Lucian Marchetti said quietly. "And I do not forget what is owed." Outside, one of the black SUVs flashed its lights. He glanced toward it, and something in his posture changed, a hardening, a closing. "You should not go home alone tonight," he said. "The man who switched those words tonight did not do it for a fee. He did it to make this table explode. Someone wanted blood in this room, Miss Castellanos, and you took the match out of their hand in front of 20 witnesses." His eyes came back to her, and for the first time she saw beneath the calm the cold, contained violence of a man who had built his life out of being the most dangerous thing in any room. "They will not love you for it. I don't even know what this is," she said. "Who you are, what that dinner was really about." "No," he agreed. "You don't." He reached into his coat and produced a card. Heavy blank, but for a single phone number, no name. He held it out, and when she took it, his fingers did not brush hers, though she felt him decide not to let them. Felt the restraint in it like heat off a stove. Call that number. If anyone you don't know comes near you, he said. Don't think. Don't be brave. Don't be the woman against the wall. Just call. And then Lucian Marchetti turned and walked out into the rain, and the 6 black cars came alive around him like a body, remembering it had a heart. And Maya Castellanos stood alone in an embassy with a blank card in her hand and the terrible, exhilarating sensation of a door she had nailed, shut 4 years ago, swinging slowly, irrevocably open. Act 2, the things he kept. She didn't call the number. Of course she didn't. She went home to her small, careful apartment in Rogers Park, made tea she didn't drink, and told herself the entire evening had been a hallucination born of adrenaline and old grief. Then 3 days later, she found the photographs. It happened by accident. The building's super had a leak in the unit above hers and needed access to the wall behind her bedroom closet. When they pulled the false back panel, a thing she had assumed was simply how the closet had always been built, there was a recess behind it, and in the recess a slim steel case. Maya waited until the super left. Her hands were steady the way they had been at the embassy, which was to say, steady the way a thing is steady right before it isn't. She opened the case. Inside were photographs, dozens. No hundreds, her leaving her apartment in the rain with a bad umbrella. Her 2 winters ago with the haircut she'd hated. Her at a farmer's market she went to maybe twice a year. Her asleep on a train, her cheek against the cold window. Her at her mother's grave the previous spring laying down the violets her mother had loved. A moment so private she had told no living soul she was going. And beneath the photographs, a second layer. Documents. The deed to her apartment building owned she now saw through a chain of shells that ended at a holding company she did not recognize. A letter from the consulting firm offering her the job 4 years ago, and stapled to it an internal memo she had never been meant to see, instructing that the candidate is to be hired regardless of interview outcome, salary and protections per the standing arrangement. She is not to be informed. The standing arrangement. Per the standing arrangement. She had not gotten that job. She had been placed in it. Her cheap, safe, anonymous little life, the apartment, the work, the obscurity she had wrapped around herself like a blanket, none of it had been hers. It had been built. A cage beautifully disguised as a hiding place. By a man who had watched her sleep on a train and grieve at a grave and never once let her know he was there. The phone rang. She looked at the case. She looked at the blank card on her counter where she had left it for 3 days, unable to throw it away. She picked up the phone. And before she could speak, his voice came down the line low and certain and terribly calm. You found them, Lucian Marchetti said. You've been watching me. Her voice came out in a register she didn't recognize, fury and fear braided so tight she couldn't pull them apart. For years. My mother's grave. You. I was alone there. I was completely alone, and you were never alone, he said. That was the entire point. You think that's a comfort? She was shaking now. You think a woman finds it comforting to learn her whole life was arranged by a stranger who took pictures of her sleeping? A silence. When he spoke again, the calm had cracked just slightly, and through the crack she heard something raw. No, he said. I think it's monstrous. I have always known it was monstrous. I told myself it was protection, and protection it was, but I am not a man who lies to himself about what he is. I owed you a debt I could never repay, and I could not approach you because the world I live in turns everything it touches into a target, and you had earned the right to be left alone. A breath. So I stayed in the dark. I kept the dark off of you, and I told myself that was love that asked for nothing. That's not love, Maya whispered. That's a museum. You kept me like an exhibit. Yes, he said simply, and the agreement was worse than any argument. It was, until 3 nights ago when you stepped away from that wall and I remembered that the woman I'd been guarding was 1,000 times more alive than the life I'd built to hide her in. I'm not calling to defend it, Miss Castellanos. I'm calling because the case you found was not the only one in the world. Reinhardt was arrested yesterday. Before my people could reach him, he was killed in his cell. The fury drained out of her, replaced by cold. He talked first, Lucian went on. The man who paid him to detonate that dinner has photographs too. Of you. He's had them for a week, and the difference between his interest in you and mine, Maya, is that I want you to live. For the first time he used her name alone, and it landed like a hand on the back of her neck. He does not. Who, she said, who wants me dead? I've been a note-taker for 4 years. You took the match out of his hand, Lucian said. in front of witnesses, and worse, far worse, when you spoke 6 languages at that table, you became overnight the most valuable interpreter in the city for exactly the kind of negotiations my world cannot survive without. You went from invisible to indispensable in 3 minutes. He cannot allow the deal to live, and he has decided that the simplest way to kill the deal is to kill the woman holding it together. A pause. His name is Lucian Marchetti. He is my uncle, and he taught me everything I know about being merciless, which is the only reason I am still alive to warn you. Headlights swept across her bedroom wall. Maya turned. Through the window on the street below, 2 cars she didn't recognize had stopped. Not black SUVs. Worse, ordinary cars, the kind that didn't announce themselves. 4 doors opened at once. Maya, Lucian said, and his voice changed entirely, became a blade. Are there cars on your street? Yes, she breathed. Bedroom closet. The panel you opened. Behind the case there's a second latch. Pull it. She did. The back of the recess swung inward onto darkness, a passage narrow threaded down through the bones of the building. He had built her an escape route into a hiding place she hadn't known was a cage. The whole monstrous architecture of his obsession suddenly reoriented itself in her mind, and she hated that the thing that might save her life was the proof of how thoroughly he had owned it. Go down, he said. I'm 90 seconds away. I've always been 90 seconds away. She went into the dark. Behind her, she heard her front door come off its hinges. He was not lying. He was 90 seconds away. She came out of a service door into the alley to find a black car already there. The rear door open, and Lucian Marchetti standing in the rain with his coat soaked through and a gun she had not expected held low against his thigh. The civilized man from the embassy was gone. What stood in the alley was older and colder, and entirely without apology. In, he said. She hesitated. 1/2 second of an entire life's worth of do not get in cars with dangerous men, and in that 1/2 second, a shot cracked off the brick beside her head, close enough that she felt the chip of it sting her. Cheek. Lucian moved faster than she could track. He stepped toward the shot, putting his own body squarely between her and the mouth of the alley, and fired twice into the dark with a flat mechanical calm that frightened her more than the gunfire. There was a cry. A car door. The wet shriek of tires. Then his hand was on her back, firm and warm and absolutely steady, guiding her into the car, and he was sliding in beside her, and the car was already moving, and his eyes were running over her face in the passing light. You're bleeding, he said, and there was a thing in his voice, a fear, naked and total, the fear of a man who has built his entire life around one fixed point and has just watched it nearly extinguish. He reached up as if to touch the cut on her cheek. He stopped. His hand hung an inch from her face, trembling, this man who had just shot 2 people without his pulse rising, and then he closed it into a fist and lowered it to his knee. It's a scratch, she said. Her own voice shook. From the brick. I'm fine. You are not fine, he said quietly, looking out at the rain. You have been in danger for 7 years and never knew it because I made certain you never had to know it. Tonight you know it. That is the worst thing I have ever done to you, and I did it to keep you alive. He was silent a moment. I will understand if you can never forgive me, but I need you to understand something in return. He turned, and the harbor gray eyes were lit from within by something that had nothing to do with debt anymore. I would burn this entire city to the waterline before I let Emil put a mark on you. Not because I owe you. The debt died in that alley. His jaw worked. Because the thought of a world without you in it is no longer a thought I can survive. And I have not let myself say that not once in 7 years because I knew that the day I said it out loud, I would never again be able to let you go. The car hissed through the flooded streets. Neon ran liquid down the windows. Maya looked at the man who had caged her in a hiding place and stood in front of a bullet for her in the same week, and she discovered she had no idea who she was anymore or who she wanted to be. Only that the woman against the wall was dead, and she did not mourn her. Where are we going, she said. Somewhere he can't reach you, Lucian said. And somewhere you can decide with the full truth in your hands for the first time whether to run from me or stand beside me. I will accept either. A muscle in his jaw, but not from a distance. Never again from a distance. Act 3. The truth at the table. The safe house was a lakefront mansion north of the city, all glass and stone and silence, a place that should have felt like luxury and felt instead like a beautiful held breath. Snow had started by the time they arrived, fat flakes drifting against the black water. inside a fire. Outside, men in the dark, watching the dark. And there, waiting in the great room with a tumbler of something amber and a face she would have recognized anywhere, was a young man with a soft mouth and old eyes. "You're her, Matteo Marchetti," said, standing so fast he nearly knocked the chair over. "You're God. I've imagined your face for 7 years. I imagined it wrong. You're he." Stopped, overcome, and did something that undid her completely. This grown man crossed the room and took both her cold hands in his and pressed them to his forehead, the gesture of a man at an altar. "Thank you," he said in the warlord's language, the language she'd used in the dark 9 hours to keep 40 people breathing. "Thank you for my life." Maya looked over his bowed head at Lucian, who stood by the fire with the expression of a man, watching the two most important facts of his existence stand in one room for the first time, and she felt the last of her fury crack down the fire. Middle. Because whatever else this family was, and it was terrible, it was steeped in blood. She had no illusions. It was also true, and she had spent 4 years convincing herself she would never again be true to anyone. Over the next hours by firelight, they told her everything. The Marchettis had been moving out of the blood trades for a decade. Lucian's slow, brutal project. The reason for the legitimate fronts. The shipping accord. The embassy dinner. He was trying to turn an empire of guns and powder into an empire of ports, and trade a thing his father had begun, and his uncle Emile had despised. The deal Maya saved was the keystone. Legitimate. A future. Emile did not want a future. Emile wanted the old world. The one where he had been a king, and he had decided that a war chaos blood in the streets, the deal in ruins, was the lever that would pry the family back from Lucian's hands into his. "He planted Reinhardt to blow up the dinner," Lucian said. "When you stopped it, you didn't just save $400 million. You took my uncle's war away from him in front of every faction in the city. You made him look weak. He cannot forgive that." His eyes found hers. "And there is one thing more. The night you saved Matteo, the convoy that Warlord ambushed. It was carrying Emile's product. Emile sent those men to their deaths to protect a shipment. When you talked the Warlord down, you saved hostages Emile had already written off. You made my uncle look like a man who spends lives carelessly in front of our father, who was still alive then. Our father gave the family to me 3 months later." A long pause. "Emile has hated you for 7 years, Maya, and never known your name. Now he knows it. You are not a loose end to him. You are the wound that started everything." The fire popped. Snow ticked against the glass. "Then, I'm not running," Maya heard herself say. Lucian went very still. "You spent 7 years keeping me in a box," she said, and her voice was steady now. Steady the way it had been at the table, the way it was when the true thing in her finally stood up. Out of guilt, out of debt, out of whatever this is. She gestured between them at the unbearable charged space he kept refusing to cross. "And it was wrong, and it was a kind of theft, and I am not going to pretend it wasn't. But you also forgot something, Lucian Marchetti. You forgot that I am not the kind of woman who needs to be hidden. I am the kind of woman who walked into a room with a gun on the table and talked for 9 hours. I don't hide from Emile. I sit down across from him, and I take the match out of his hand again, except this time he'll see me coming." Something broke open in his face. He crossed the room, and this time he did not stop at the invisible line. This time he reached up, and with a gentleness that seemed impossible in those hands, brushed his thumb across the small healing cut on her cheek, the one the brick had left. "I have wanted to touch you," he said, very low, "for 7 years. And I told myself I never would, because a man like me does not get to keep a thing like you." His thumb traced the line of her cheekbone. "Tell me to stop, and I will live in the dark again. I have done it before." Maya did not tell him to stop. She rose onto her toes, and she closed the distance he had spent 7 years refusing to close. And she kissed him, and the kiss was not soft. It was the collision of two people who had both spent years building walls against the exact thing they wanted most. And when it broke, they were both shaking, his forehead against hers, his breath ragged, his hands fisted in the back of her grey dress, like a man holding onto the edge of something. "This is dangerous," he whispered. "Being mine is the most dangerous thing you could choose." "I know," she said. "I read the file. I'm choosing it anyway." Across the room, Matteo had quietly smiling, slipped out the door. They had 3 days of stolen, snowbound peace. She would remember them for the rest of her life, as the place where she learned that the coldest man in Chicago laughed in his sleep, that he had read more poetry than most professors, that he had taught himself her 6 languages and 4 more out of 7 years of wanting to one day understand a single thing she might say to him. She taught him the warlord's dialect properly. He taught her the names of the constellations over the lake. They did not waste the danger on caution. They knew what was coming. It came on the 4th morning, and it came the way Emile did everything through betrayal. Lucian's most trusted man, the head of the safe house, detail a quiet, loyal veteran named Bruno who had served the family for 20 years, was the one who let them in. Maya would understand later that Emile had not bought Bruno with money. He had taken Bruno's daughter and made the math simple. And that was the kind of man. Emile was the kind who understood that the strongest loyalty in the world is a parent's, and that it can be turned into a leash. She woke to gunfire in the dark of pre-dawn. What followed she would only ever remember in cinematic fragments lit by muzzle flash. Lucian shoving her down behind the stone island in the kitchen. His body, a wall. Matteo dragging a wounded man through a doorway. The great glass wall of the house blowing inward in a glittering wave. The snow outside churned black and red. Bruno on his knees in the foyer weeping and shouting, "They have my girl, they have my girl," as Emile's men poured past him. And then Emile himself walking through the broken glass into the firelight, as if he had all the time in the world, an old man with Lucian's bones, and none of Lucian's mercy. A man who had spent 7 years on this single morning, the interpreter Emile said, almost fondly looking at Maya where she crouched behind the island. "Do you know I never saw your face until last week? 7 years. I built 1,000 monsters in my mind, and you're a little gray sparrow." He smiled. "I'm going to enjoy this far more than is dignified." He raised the gun. Not at Lucian, at her. What happened next happened in less than a second, and Maya replayed it for the rest of her life. Lucian moved. Not for his own gun, there wasn't time, and he knew there wasn't time. He moved into the line the way he had in the alley, the way he had at the dinner with his patients, the way he had for 7 years from the dark. He put his body between Emile's gun and the woman behind the island, and Emile, who had not expected his nephew to choose a sparrow over his own life, who had built his entire war on the belief that no Marchetti loved anything more than power, hesitated. He hesitated for half a second, and half a second was all the woman who had once talked a warlord down for 9 hours needed, because Maya was not crouching behind the island in terror. She was crouching behind the island, listening to the men in the dark outside, to their accents, to the language they used when they thought no one who mattered could understand them. They were not Emile's men. Not really. They were mercenaries contracted through a broker, the kind who fight for whoever holds the contract. And Maya had heard in the last 60 seconds 3 of them arguing in Serbian about whether they had been paid yet. And the answer she had heard was no. She stood up. "Emile's broke," she said in clear, carrying Serbian to the dark, to the men with the guns, ignoring the old man entirely. "He spent everything on the war that already failed. The man you work for cannot pay you because the deal he was going to steal back was saved in front of the whole city 4 nights ago by me. Marchetti pays. Marchetti's the future." She switched smooth as water to the Albanian of the 2 by the window, and then the Russian of the 3 by the stair, telling each of them the same arithmetic in the language of their own self-interest. "The old man is a dead account. The young one runs the ports now. Whose side pays your children?" She did to that room of mercenaries exactly what someone had tried to do to the embassy. She translated the truth. And one by one the guns lowered. Emile Marchetti turned the gun still half raised. The dawning horror on his face. The horror of a man who has just watched the one woman he underestimated take the match out of his hand a second time. And Lucian, free now, no longer a shield, became at last the thing the whole city feared. It was over very quickly after that. Maya did not watch the end of it. She had seen enough endings. She turned away toward the broken wall and the grey lake and the falling snow, and she let the man she loved do the terrible final thing that men in his world did, and she did not pretend to herself that it was anything other than what it was. When it was done, Lucian came to her across the glass, his hands and his shirt dark with it, and he did not touch her, did not assume the right, only stood close in the freezing wind off the lake with the snow settling on his black hair. "You can leave now," he said hoarsely. "It's finished. Emile is finished. There's no debt, no danger, no cage. I'll have the apartment put in your name. The job, if you want it, or any job anywhere in the world. You can speak 6 languages, Maya. The world is yours. You never have to see me again. You're free." His voice broke on the last word. and she understood that he was offering her the one thing he had never been able to give her: the truth, no longer arranged, no longer hidden, no strings, no surveillance, an open door and an open hand. Maya looked at him for a long time. "You stood in front of the gun," she said. "Yes. You've been standing in front of it for 7 years. Yes. Then stop," she said softly, and stepped over the broken glass and took his terrible bloody hand in both of hers the way his brother had taken hers, and pressed it to her own cheek over the small healed scar. "Stop standing in front of me, Lucian. Stand beside me. That's the whole thing I ever needed. Not a guardian in the dark, a partner in the light." Epilogue: the table 1 year later. The ballroom of the consulate glittered with candlelight and the lilies. There were lilies again, but this time they were the right ones. The lilies of celebration, because the woman who had ordered them knew the difference now, and made certain everyone else did, too. The shipping accord had not only survived, it had become the model for 3 more. Ambassador Diallo, now retired, had flown in from Dakar specifically to attend, and when he found Maya at the head of the table, no longer in a grey dress against a wall, but in deep emerald at the center of everything, the chief negotiator now, the woman both sides trusted. He kissed both her hands and said in his home dialect that the world was a slightly more honest place, because she had finally stopped hiding in it. Gregory Halloran was not present. Gregory Halloran, it had turned out, had known more about Reinhardt's hiring than he'd ever admitted, and his firm, Lucian's Front, once had been quietly, legally, completely dismantled, its assets folded into a foundation that funded interpreters for refugees who had no one to translate the truth for them. It was called the Castellanos Initiative. Maya had not chosen the name. Lucian had. She'd let him keep it. Across the room, he stood where he always stood now, not in the watcher's seat in the corner, not in the dark, but at her side in the light where everyone could see him, the most dangerous man in the city, rendered by one grey-eyed woman into something the city was still learning to call merely powerful. Matteo was beside him, laughing at something alive, gloriously alive. The empire of guns was nearly gone. The empire of ports was nearly built. It had cost more than Lucian would ever say out loud, and some nights Maya still woke to the sound of breaking glass that wasn't there, and on those nights she found his eyes already open in the dark, watching over her the way he always had, except now she was allowed to watch back. He came to her as the music started, and he held out his hand openly, asking the way he had finally learned to ask for everything. 7 years I watched you from across rooms, he murmured against her ear as they moved into the dance. I never once imagined I'd be allowed to cross one. You almost weren't, she said. You built a beautiful cage, Lucian. You're lucky I prefer the door. He laughed, the laugh she'd first heard in his sleep in a snowbound house, the one no one else in his world had ever heard at all, and he pulled her closer, and the candlelight ran gold along the windows, and outside the rain had finally stopped over the city that had once tried so hard to kill. Here, say something to me, he said. In one of your languages. Any of them. I've learned them all now, you know. 7 years. I wanted to understand the first thing you ever chose to say to me. So Maya rose onto her toes and put her lips to the ear of the man who had loved her in silence from the dark, and finally learned to love her out loud in the light. And she told him in the warlord's dialect, the language she had once used for 9 hours to keep 40 strangers breathing, the language that had started everything, that she was not afraid of him and never had been, and that the most dangerous thing he had ever done was the one she would never forgive and never stop being grateful for, all at once, forever. He pulled back to look at her, the harbor gray eyes bright. I didn't catch all of it, he admitted, smiling. You're too fast for me. You'll always be too fast for me. Good, Maya said, and kissed him in front of the whole glittering watching room, the woman who had stepped away from the wall and never gone back. Then you'll just have to keep listening. And he did. For the rest of his life, he did. The end. And so the woman they sat in the corner, the one they called Frumpy, the one told to stay invisible, became the only voice 2 nations and 1 dangerous man would ever fully trust. Sometimes the person the whole room underestimates is the one holding the only thing that matters, the truth. If Maya's story pulled you in, if you felt that breath catch when she finally stepped away from the wall, do something for me before you go. Tap that like button. It's a small thing, but it tells me you want more stories exactly like this one, and it helps these stories reach someone else who needs to hear that being underestimated is not the same as being powerless. If you know someone who loves a slow burn, dangerous, impossible to stop kind of love story, Share this with them. Some stories are meant to be passed quietly from one person to another like a card with a single phone number on it. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me the moment Lucian stepped into the line of fire instead of reaching for his own gun. Was that the moment you fell for him, or did he lose you? The second she found those hidden photographs. There's no wrong answer. I read every single one. Here's where you come in. The next story is yours to choose. Drop a number in the comments and tell me which one you want me to write next. 1. The Mafia boss and the runaway bride. She leaves a man at the altar and climbs into the back of the wrong black car. His car, and the door locks before she can scream. 2. The Mafia boss and the ER nurse. She saves his life on her operating table without knowing his name and wakes the next morning to find armed men guarding her apartment and a single white rose on her pillow. 3. The Mafia boss and the prosecutor's daughter. She's building the case that will put him away for life. He already knows, and he's already decided he'd rather lose the empire than lose her. Whichever number gets the most comments, I write next week. So, subscribe, turn on that notification bell so you don't miss it, and stay with me. Because in this world, the most dangerous thing a person can be is unforgettable. I'll see you in the next one.